Hello, welcome to Biblio the show on AADL TV, brought to you by the Ann Arbor District Library, where we pick one topic and discuss it each week. My name is Amanda, and with me is Christopher and Lucy, and we are very excited, well, I am, about today's topic. We are discussing adult fiction that is under 200 pages. So if you are looking for perhaps a quick, perhaps a good book, we might have some recommendations for you today. Lucy, what book did you bring to share?
So I brought a sort of unusual book. It's a novel called Our Spoons Came from Woolworths. This book was written in 1950, and I read it. It was reissued by New York Review Books. I love this publisher's books. I don't know when, but I read it maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And it was such a surprise to me. It is such an unusual story that's like makes you laugh, but it's also filled with some tragic events. And it's the story of two young artists living in England in the 1930s, Sophia and Charles. They meet in a train station. They fall in love and they get married, and they're blissfully married. They're poor. They don't care. Sophia switches to commercial artwork to make money for them. Charles is too much into his art to worry about money. They are also incredibly naive, and that's like one of the funny parts of the book. The book is being told by Sophia in the first person. She's relating the story of what happened in the book, but it's 8 years later. And so some of their thinking, it's so unusual in its naivete. And what happens is Sophia gets pregnant really early on. Charles is very upset by this. He thinks it's going to ruin everything because they're just like being poor artists. And Sophia has this idea that she thinks if she decides she doesn't want to be pregnant, that she won't get pregnant. That's the kind of naivete that they're dealing with. In the very beginning of this book that there are going to be some darker points. The first line of the book is, I told Helen my story and she went home and cried. So you know that there's going to be something that's a little bit tear-jerking. So Charles is not happy that Sophia is pregnant. Sophia is struggling with trying to make money and keep Charles happy and feeling bad. And another part of the beginning of this book, on the copyright page, it says, the only things that are true in this story are the wedding and chapters 10, 11, and 12, and the poverty. And that's another note that you should heed, because when you get to chapters 10, 11, and 12, these true chapters are the ones that detail the birth of Sophia's child and all the humiliating and dehumanizing horror that she feels at that event. And she goes into detail about how her treatment was horrendous and how she felt. Charles wasn't there. She ends up having to drag her suitcase from room to room to room. And this book was written in 1950. Even today, I don't think that there are a lot of novels written where this kind of story where a woman would go into detail about her experience giving birth. And so for this to have been written at that time is really unusual and remarkable. And those chapters really stay with you. That makes it sound like it's such a dark and heavy book, but because Sophia's voice is so unusual, at times the story is strangely lighthearted, and it makes you kind of laugh out loud, even though they're living in the Great Depression in England. And so it's so hard to describe. It's so unusual. And I think that's why I loved it so much when I picked it up. It's just has this funny side and these little turns of phrase that are so unusual, but then this very real story about what women go through and have gone through in the past when they are giving birth. So I highly recommend, though it sounds very strange, Our Spoons Came from Woolworths by Barbara Comans. Christopher, what did you pick? Oh, and it's 196 pages. Christopher.
Well, I cheated because my book is just over the 200-page mark, but don't tell anyone. So I read Wolf in White Van by John Darnielle, who is perhaps better known as the driving force behind the band Mountain Goats, although he does have a brand new book out now, just came out, called Devil House. So this book is told from the perspective of Sean, who is a recluse, and he lives alone. He's also horribly disfigured because he shot himself in the head when he was 17 and in high school. The book is, you could imagine, not very optimistic, and it's not very cheerful. Nothing gets wrapped up in a nice way at the end, but there's still a lot to connect to the book and to the character. When Sean is in the hospital recovering, he invents a world called Trace Italian. And this world becomes a play-by-mail game that he develops. And you may not have ever heard of a play-by-mail game, but these were very popular in the 80s, where you would send your move into a central person who was compiling the moves, and they would send you a letter back. And so this was a whole subgenre of gaming. Anyway, Sean has this game that's quite popular, and this is how he makes his money. At some point, some of the players take the game too literally, and they set off into the Kansas plains looking for a location that Sean has made up. There's a court case, but I don't want to make you think that that's a major part of the story. Really, it's an allusion to everything that was happening in the 80s with rock music and the PMRC and backwards masking and things like that, because the story has lots and lots of references to arcades, parents worrying about what their kids were listening to, or games they were playing, or anything like that. So it's quite an interesting look into that era. So at the end of the story, Sean is outside his parents' bedroom in a flashback, and he has a rifle, and he's contemplating both killing his parents and also all the possible futures that he could have. And he finally says, too many, too late, not that, not those, not these, this. And he goes into his bedroom and shoots himself. And that's the end of the story. So this is like I said, this is a fairly heavy book. We are left to make our own conclusions about what happened to Sean and why he did this and why he was even contemplating this. And there are lots and lots of ideas about this. I'm not going to give you mine, but it's really an amazing book. You may not think that there's anything to latch onto with it, but there's so much there. And this is really not a book about gaming or geeks or any of this subculture. This is high literature, and it's incredibly readable. So that is Wolf and White Van by John Darnielle. Lucy? Oh, sorry, Lucy already went. Amanda.
Sure, I will go. So, Christopher, I also chose a book by mistake that was over 200 pages. I wanted to read this book for a while. It's been on my list, and I was so sure it was 197 pages. As soon as I saw this topic for discussion, I was like, yes, that is the book I am reading. And on my second sitting reading it, I was on page 160, and I flipped through the end, and it is not 197 pages. It is 223 pages. And I'm sorry, but it is still such a fast read. Lucy, you know this book. The book is My Sister, the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. She is a Nigerian author. And the reason I say I'm allowing myself to still do this is The chapters are pretty short, and a lot of them have so much blank space at the end of it. So honestly, even though it's 223 pages, I would say it's maybe 180, and it is still a very quick read. So this is the story. There are two sisters, and one of them is a serial killer. The older sister is Corday, and the younger sister is Ayola. And as the older sister in her family, in her culture in Nigeria, she is supposed to be the caretaker, look after her sister, making sure she's up to no good, making sure she's up and at school and eating and doing all the things that she's supposed to do. And she does that. That is just naturally their relationship. They've got a good relationship. But as they grow older, Corday's more sensible. She's a nurse at a hospital, and her younger sister she's beautiful. She is gorgeous. She just she stops attention. She gets so much attention from men, and Corday is not like that. So she sort of has this, she kind of battles knowing that her sister is the chosen one, the beautiful one, the one everybody wants, where she is the sensible one. And then being the older sister, who is also the caretaker, she is often cleaning up her sister's messes, literally cleaning up her sister's messes. When she gets the phone call saying he's dead, I killed him, she has to go and help her sister clean up a crime scene essentially from her stabbing several boyfriends over time. But what's interesting and neat about this book, it is dark. It's billed as being funny. I think there was some dark humor to it, but it wasn't like super funny in that way. And I like dark humor. But for me, what I loved about it was reading and it's told in the first person from Corday's point of view. It's her point of view. So you get her telling it, and it kind of interweaves some things that have happened in their childhood and some of the relationships with her father and her mother and other people in her family, and sort of what it means to be a sibling. So as a person who has a sister, and I'm the older sister, it kind of made me think about like, what do sisters do for each other? How do they go above and beyond like a friend relationship or some other relationship they might have? Because even though her and her sister are very different, they're still close. They still hang out in each other's rooms. So I just thought it was very interesting and fun it was fun to read. And I don't have an aversion to blood and gore. And this book wasn't gory, but there's a serial killer involved. And I was like, oh, a serial killer story. Yes. So this book, My Sister, the Serial Killer, it was on the library's, the ongoing Black Lives Matter reading list that we've been putting together. And this book was discussed last year at some point. So if you want to read a full discussion with many people discussing it, I recommend it. But I enjoyed this book. Again, it's a fast read. I will say it's under 200 pages, even though it's a little bit over. If you're looking for a fast read that you can read in a day or two and want to read about a good sister story with some darkness and some mystery and some drama, because you know the younger, beautiful sister is going to, of course, fall for the guy that Corday wants. So there's a lot of fun, like sister drama that I also enjoyed reading about. So that is My Sister, the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. Does anybody have any final thoughts on the books we've discussed today or anything book related? Nope. All right. Well, there you are, 3 very different books that all fall around 200 pages if you're looking for a quicker read than some of the bigger books you're used to reading. That is it for this week. If you want to let us know what you've been reading, if you've got a great adult fiction recommendations under 200 pages, a lot of people are looking for those. Please click the link below. It'll take you to the library's website and you can drop a comment, recommend us some titles, please. We are always looking for more things to read. Thank you so much for joining us here on AADL TV for Bibliophiles. We'll see you next time.